Welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm Director of Product Marketing for our cloud providers in VMware. And today I'm joined by Alfredo. Welcome, Alfredo, to Feature Fridays. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. Do you want to just give everyone a brief introduction about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Perfect. Yes, thank you so much, Guy, for your time. My name is Alfredo Santana. I work with the multi-cloud strategy and architecture team. I'm a multi-cloud solution strategist.
So tell me a bit about that team. It's been running for a good couple of years now, and it's changed. And as VMware business units often change, but you guys provide a hell of a lot of value to our cloud provider community. Tell me, what sort of stuff does the team get up to?
So we primarily focus on helping our partner community, especially our cloud provider community, on how to monetize and how to come up with new strategies for new products. So it just kind of depends what the partner is interested in. It could be the partner is launching a new business or they want to go into a new line of business, and they call us to kind of find out what are the trends in the industry, what are the best practices, how to be successful kind of quickly. And we other partners that call us it's because they want to understand if what they're doing today is kind of goes to the industry benchmarks, that they're doing the best practices, if you will. So because we have wide-ranging conversations with our partners on a global basis, that we're able to pull in all those best practices to bring them back to the partner community at the end of the day.
Right. And because you're having those conversations with partners, then you're obviously learning about what they do and how they do it, and helping them kind of navigate, as we VMware produce products and solutions, how to kind of take those to market and monetize those. And today's session's all about like hyperscale cloud. And, over the years, certainly we've heard a lot about how our cloud providers sometimes struggle to compete against hyperscale, and really they shouldn't struggle, right? They've got a lot of unique value that they need to monetize and take that conversation away from the bare bones of necessary price and moving on to like the additional value they bring. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, that is kind of the main aspect that we're seeing. When we talk to partners, they just focus on competing either directly against a hyperscaler or directly, especially on price. And there's so many much more features or areas that they should be able to focus and compete effectively against the hyperscalers that they really don't do. So that is part of why, we when we talk with partners, we tell them, okay, first of all, what is your go-to-market strategy? As part of your go-to-market strategy, it cannot be, I need to compete against X and Y, Z company. It has to be, what is the problem statement of your customer that you're trying to solve, first of all. And then what is the value proposition that you bring to the table, and trying to meet your customer in the middle to help them with their particular problem and challenges, and how do you solve for that customer's problem.
So even if you're just providing an infrastructure, if you're a basic infrastructure provider, there's still value over and above the hyperscalers with those kind of ancillary things like performance, data security, and a load of other things which you can draw upon to create that picture for your customer, to help them understand why you're different and why perhaps you are more expensive than the hyperscale provider, but with good reason.
Not only do you have to differentiate, you might be a little bit much more costlier than the hyperscalers, but because you're differentiating, because you provide probably local language support, because you know the customer much more intimately than the hyperscaler would. Because you reduce the complexity for that particular customer. Because if you're a customer, you're going into the hyperscaler's website, it is very complex. It is a brand new language they have to speak of, and very, very complex. And complexity not only on the technical side, also on the billing side as well, because you're moving to a business model which the consumption will determine what will be your bill at the end of the month. But if you don't have a lot of right-sizing type of processes and technologies, your bill can and will balloon over time. And finally, the high touch and premium SLA that partners are able to provide to their customers that otherwise the hyperscalers will not. The hyperscalers will provide all the infrastructure and the scalability, which is really good. However, it doesn't provide any type of either personalization, high touch, or any additional value-added services that customers may find much more attractive. Because if I have to do everything by myself, rather than hiring somebody to do it for me, depending on the situation, customers may find that having somebody to do it and be their trusted advisor is much better than just going and finding every single tool to build yourself.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a lot of things there, right? Let's just unpack a few of these. So the high touch premium SLA, I mean, that is so important. When there is something wrong with your infrastructure service, it's not working in hyperscale, who are you going to call?
You can definitely have a support structure with a hyperscaler. However, depending on the amount of budget that your customer has, obviously they will, go from everything on chat to, having somebody assigned. But obviously we would assume that variation, or that those two extremes, are going to have very different pricing ranges in terms of what the support structure are from the hyperscalers. Yeah. But as you said, if you have a business critical or mission critical application and you want to have a team that is right there with you, it will most likely be better to talk to a particular partner, because a partner will definitely be in the same geographical, area that the customer would. When the hyperscalers, obviously they will, as long as you don't have the enterprise contract, everything will be either self-service or done remotely, basically.
Yeah, and let's not forget the hyperscalers, like you say, they can provide the infrastructure. And depending on what size customer you are, you might have a direct support agreement with them, but that's very, very premium, and yes, not a lot of them do, right? So let's think about our cloud providers and their typical customers, less than 200 VMs. Many of them drastically less than that. So the reality of it is those customers are not going to have any sort of lifeline apart from direct chat on the internet. Right. And if you're using a cloud provider, because let's face it, right, when we look at all the other stuff, there's clear differentiators in running your stuff in your data centers, in a cloud provider data center. But most clouds today are multi-cloud, and every single customer is going to have an element of hyperscale in them. However, having a cloud provider manage that for you is where you're getting that additional layer of service from them, the premium SLA, the high touch. They're the application experts in those hyperscale clouds as well, and they probably have much better support agreements in place with the hyperscale providers to mediate and provide you, the customer, the best level of support.
That is right. And that's why we say, differentiate. And that's part of the differentiating aspect as well. It's not only the high touch, but also differentiating as having a broad portfolio of either cloud services that the partner can provide to their customer, in the case of a multi-cloud solution set, but also being able to help the customer in their particular needs. So today, most customers are moving to a multi-cloud environment, but they don't know either how to go through that journey into the cloud in a multi-cloud world, and especially the day two operations. Our partners are much more capable of handling and managing that environment for the customers, because they've been doing it on their own premises or managing the customer's environment as an outsourcing. So for them to extend to the public cloud, first of all, they're not only focused on one particular public cloud, most likely they're focused on several different public clouds. So that expertise of being able to manage that environment, and especially manage that environment on a very secure manner, which is a very important aspect, it is very telling that will be part of the not only differentiating, but also IP that the partners provide to their customers. So that is an area of differentiating yourself, reducing complexity, providing high touch and SLAs as well.
Yeah. And let's talk about the complexity stuff, because, that's a real challenge. We've all seen the Great Resignation. We've all seen the fact that businesses are trying to modernize, and they're faced with, basic challenges such as skills and resources to underpin that modernization. All the while they have competition coming, which is creating more problems and more pressure on the business to react and do something. And when those resources aren't there, then you've got a serious challenge But also when you're starting to learn different public cloud infrastructures, each one's different. It's not like the VMware hypervisor, which is, prolific in, lots and lots of different cloud environments and cloud providers, and indeed in hyperscale. It becomes a compounding issue, complexity, and that in combination with the fact that customers' data and data in general grows between 20 and 30% year on year, and it's not standing still, and you're trying to do app modernization, and you're trying to cut costs, and you can't find resources to do it stuff. The complexity just mounts up.
Yeah, so the complexity keeps growing, and part of what customers don't necessarily realize is that when they want to go to the public cloud, they just see the value or the pricing, actually, I would say, the pricing of a particular service. But then when you start adding up every single component that you need to have basically the equivalent to a software-defined data center on the public cloud, then you see the big difference of, the VMware partners do provide a lot of value in terms of their infrastructure. That's one. In terms of the complexity as well, the biggest security risk for any partner and any customer when they have their infrastructure online is not so much that they don't have let's say a particular firewall, a particular appliance, virtual appliance that will help them safeguard their data, is that they're not configured correctly. And most of the cases when you see on the press of there's any particular break-in into a company's public cloud environment, it's because of lack of a good configuration in their environment that allows basically, customer databases to be open online or to other type of data breaches. So that is part of that complexity that we say that the partners are better suited to reduce it for the customers. And coming from my background of coming from a VMware partner and customer, we had a particular example in which a customer decided to move to the hyperscalers, but they came back and said, even though we're moving on, we want you to help us with our environment. We want you to help us with our multi-cloud environment because we trust you. We know who you are. We talk the same language. We're in the same country, and it's easier to do business with you. Even though that, the hyperscalers are very easy to do business with, but they felt such security, if you will, because of our practices and what we did in that particular time, that they still wanted us to manage their environment. So that is part of another area of differentiating that, as an example, I provide that story, that partners have a much more trusted relationship with their customers. They're able to, establish that relationship, that trust relationship. They will be better off because they're helping the customer every step of the way from from their on-premise environment to a hybrid environment to a multi-cloud environment, and then how to manage everything in between for that particular customer.
Yeah. So cloud providers should essentially, and when looking at this competitive advantage they have, they should try and capture kind of all of these aspects in the way they go to market. And I just wanted to reiterate something which I think is quite important. Complexity, when you go and buy an infrastructure service from someone, you have to look at the ancillary parts of that service, which are going to be, how do I protect it? How do I secure it? Security, you just mentioned, cloud providers deliver, gold hardened builds, aligned to recognize secure industry standards. The data centers are secure. So consider the physical security as well as the virtual security. And then think about things like disaster recovery. You have to, a hyperscale may seem cheap, but once you start building out egress fees, storage, secondary instances to be available within an RPO, it suddenly starts getting quite expensive, and you start building up on this what was otherwise quite a seemingly cheap service suddenly becomes more complex, and that complexity incurs cost. Whereas with VMware and vSphere, a lot of these, I'm going to call them basics, right? Because they are basics. Things like vMotion for us have been around for a long time, and disaster recovery and recovery runbooks and all of that capability combined with what the cloud provider brings in terms of resilience, physical, logical security, things like virus protection, things like IDS, IPS, they're all built in as pretty much a standard in terms of what the cloud provider offers. So it's a lot of those kind of hidden costs which aren't actually necessarily pulled out and shown line by line to the customer. And I think that's where, customers have a perception that hyperscale is cheaper.
Yes, and let me flash to your point. This is a quick slide on some of those components that you mentioned. There are included in our software-defined data center infrastructure, if you will. And you're right that if you try to do an apples to apples comparison of what you see here on the slide at a high level to what you would need from the hyperscalers to provide kind of the same level of infrastructure resiliency and network security availability, it would be a very much more of an expensive type of proposition. So this is part of those particular features that the partners need to highlight to their customers, that, for example, solutions like vMotion, theme provisioning, stretch cluster services, policy-based storage management, and so on and so on. Those are, they provide a lot of value. But if you, as a partner, don't communicate the value of those particular offerings and the use case scenarios to the customer, to your customer, then that value obviously is not being realized.
Yeah.
So, for example, micro-segmentation. There is no real equivalent, if you will, within the hyperscalers, because they're not necessarily focused on east and west traffic and how to secure that type of traffic. They're much more on how do we provide scale to our customers, but have in mind that all the hyperscalers have a dual level of responsibility in terms of the safety of the data. Yes. So for them, it's part of the customer's problem that they have to secure it, but necessarily they will have all the different solutions that we provide to be able to provide that security component, if you will.
Yeah, 100%.
And the other thing that I would say to our partner community is, when you go doing your go-to-market strategy, is highlight or try to find out what is the value that you provide to your customers. What is the unique offering that you're going to be providing? And here's just a small list of items that partners need to find out and say, what is my message? What is my value to my customers? Where do we fit in, so that you can much more effectively compete against the hyperscalers, but also be able to provide a much better value and increase your margin, percentage that you're able to attain, because you have a specific, very focused area of expertise, if you will.
Yeah. Can we just go back to the previous slide? I just want to highlight a couple of things there. Sure. So I wrote a solution brief on Cloud Director, and I'll put the link in below. One of the things I focused on big time was resource pooling, because there is no similar concept within hyperscale cloud. They sell a unit, a virtual t-shirt size. And yeah, sure, you can do the same in VCD, but you can also sell a resource pool and give customers that dynamic expand in, expand out kind of capability. And there's a lot of things here. When I've tried to do kind of competitive analysis to hyperscaler services, and you mentioned microsegmentation, doesn't exist. So when you're looking at this from a provider, think about what does microsegmentation provide you? It provides you excellent ransomware protection, optimal routing for app modernization, routing offload, and faster packet transition. Why are these important? Well, they're really important if you want to, protect your environment. If you're looking at building new apps and you want to use Kubernetes, for example, you've got all of the stuff within the cloud provider's stack, like the SDDC stack, and with VCD, you've got some really excellent differentiated capabilities. So I would look at each one of these and think, all right, vMotion, well, why would that differentiate me? Okay, so now maintenance doesn't necessarily mean downtime. That's perhaps one thing. And downtime, how much preemptive time do you get from a hyperscaler provider before they announce we're going to do some maintenance? I think you get 1 or 2 chances to shift it, but it's like 5-6 hours planning time. That's it. They give you to absorb that change. I'm not sure. I'm talking about perhaps old numbers here, but those are really important if you're running your business online and you need to have that uptime guaranteed. And if maintenance is going to cause downtime in a hyperscaler, which it would, then you're going to need to buy a secondary environment. Boom, that's your cost model completely destroyed. And this is some of the stuff which you're getting, out of the box with the VMware application stack. Just down at the product level, there's a ton of value to kind of dive into.
Yeah, totally agree. And to kind of further complement what you were saying in terms of the SLAs, this is for a single instance SLA.
Okay.
This information provided by each individual, hyperscaler on their particular website. And this kind of shows you what is the, not only the single instance SLA that they have, but what does that mean in terms of downtime per year? And this is something that customers don't realize, that if they want to have 99.99, they need to have instances in several either regions or availability zones to be able to have higher nines, if you will, of an SLA. That our partners, because they have vMotion as part of their standard technology components within VMware, they're able to move those do a vMotion of those VMs and not have any particular downtime. So that is, as you said, one of the major benefits that we provide. And the more informed is the customer of the features and benefits that we provide, the better armed there will be to, not only for the partners, but also for the customers to understand what is it that the hyperscalers are providing. And always finding out what is the fine print is very important and very telling to be aware that, the hyperscalers do provide a good and valuable service, but there is a lot of fine print, a lot of hidden costs. You mentioned that they need to be aware of, that not everything is because it's very low priced in terms of services, that everything is, a paradise, if you will. There are a lot of pitfalls that partners need to provide that information to customers, as well as customers do their own research as well.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good example, right? I mean, what we're saying here is hyperscalers aren't bad. They have their place. They're good. They deliver a good service for what they do, but recognize what that service is, the constraints of that service. And for example, you mentioned if you want to have 100% uptime, you need to have different instances and different availability zones. That's duplication, but also there's costs for networking, storage. Your application needs to be designed to be fault tolerant, right? It's not going to just happen, and that incurs more complexity. And if you're happy with that and you're using the hyperscaler for that, then that's great. But if you're looking at moving to hyperscale, but you want to perhaps your reasoning for using hyperscale is because you want global load balancing, for example. Well, there's no reason why that can't be in a distributed environment and use global hyperscaler load balancing services, but have your actual application still running in a VMware environment. There's all sorts of possibilities there. Just recognizing that hyperscale is purely that, right? They do what's on the tin. They do it very well, highly repetitive, highly scalable, but it has some caveats that everyone needs to be aware of, because I think there's a certain level of assumption that people have based on their own historical IT environments and capabilities within those environments.
Yes, totally agree. Customers don't necessarily realize that level of benefit that the hyperscalers provide does have a lot of complexity on the back end. And that is part of our partners are better suited and able to provide and guide that customer in their cloud journey. And as you mentioned, you might have an application that if it was well architected, you might have some components on running on premise of the customer's location, maybe on the VMware Cloud Partners data center, and some parts on the public cloud provider. And that is, that is the benefit of having a distributed serverless architecture, if you will. But the application has to be created to function that way, and then two, have somebody, especially the partner, that will be able to provide that additional level of capability to the customer of saying, well, we have this application that is distributed. It's not centrally located, if you will. And because of different components can run in different locations, then this is the best location to place that particular workload to be able to run, as you mentioned. So if you might want to have a global DNS service, if you will, definitely these hyperscalers are very well suited to offer that particular service. Now, if you're much more concerned of a particular part of the application, because it's running confidential information to be running it either on the customer's on-premise or in the partner's infrastructure, then you can run that particular component within more of a secluded or private cloud environment than the hyperscalers do provide.
Yeah.
And that is part of the go-to-market of the partner. There's a lot of different tools that the partners can use to not only differentiate themselves, but offer even new services, for example. Mm-hmm. So one of the big things that I have here in terms of this particular slide that I want to highlight is it's sovereign cloud. For all those customers that are based outside of the US, this is a big topic of conversation because customers are aware and obviously concerned of where, not only physically, where is their data being stored? Is it being stored in this particular country, in this particular company, but also what are the laws that are, overseeing, if you will, that data? Because it's not so much that, oh yes, my data is residing in the EU, but who is the company that is, maintaining that infrastructure? Is it a local-based, EU-based company, or is it an international company that is governed by the laws of their base country, if you will? Mm-hmm. So sovereign cloud, it is a big topic, and it's not only for governments that obviously would like to use, the cloud to either run or store their information, but also for other types of private enterprises, maybe financial enterprises, more of other types of industries are deemed national security for that particular country. So sovereign cloud is a big opportunity for our partners to differentiate themselves against the hyperscalers, but also to provide another layer of value to their customers, whichever the customers are. It's either the government customers or private enterprise customers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, what we were talking about just a moment ago is really the right cloud for the application. It's not necessarily a conversation around public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud, blah, blah, blah. Everything has connotations and everything is at some point going to hit shared connections unless you're a completely isolated, segregated environment. And looking at the right cloud for the application then becomes, well, what are the components of the application? What data is the application consuming? So it then becomes a data classification exercise. So you might be absolutely fine and very cool with having some data in a hyperscale cloud because that data has no classification assigned to it. But when you start looking at data that is secret, top secret, confidential, whatever your classifications levels are within your country, that data then needs to be under jurisdictional control of the nation that you're existing in. And that's not just about data residency. That's about, you mentioned the legal frameworks and the jurisdictional control over that data in your cloud. And this is, I think, it's becoming much more of a conversation now as people are starting to wake up to the fact that data is the new oil. We've got to monetize our data better. We've got to mitigate against risk. We don't want our data exposed. We equally don't want to be hit by ransomware and lose all our data and get it all encrypted. There's so many things to consider around that data security aspect. And our cloud providers are uniquely placed to help customers with that conversation. They are the expert in Azure, AWS, Google, Oracle Cloud, also the experts in VMware running their own stuff on premise or in their data centers. So they can have that conversation very objectively with a customer, understanding 90% of customers have got a multi-cloud environment. What does your data classification look across that multiple cloud, and then make the judgments based on the application needs and the data classification requirements about where that should be actually residing. And that's totally unique to understanding a customer's business, really understanding it, understanding the business not only now, but what are their future plans. And I think one of the differentiators cloud providers can offer is to be that business partner with the customer, to actually understand where they're going, what projects they've got coming up, support them with that as they go through that transition, and be making the right choices and supporting them as they go. It's a very unique situation that our cloud providers have today, which vastly differentiates from just a pure infrastructure play.
That's right. We were recently talking to a partner slash customer that they were in that bit of a conundrum. They're a cloud provider, but also a telco, and they were migrating to become much more of agile telco, if you will, within virtualizing a lot of their telco group.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that they came to us, and certainly one of our partners can be put in this particular example with one of their customers, is precisely that: how to place those particular workloads and when to decide whether to move that workload, to keep it on premise, to move it online to the public cloud, to do a hybrid environment, if you will. And there are a lot of different factors. It could be a business type of factor, a strategic type of factor that says, well, we don't want to consume as much as the cloud providers offer because of a strategy that we're competing against them. So we rather have as much as possible in our own private cloud. It could be a technical one that, because of the hyperscaler's global footprint, that there are some components that you do want to run on a public cloud environment, if you will. So there, as you mentioned, there are a lot of different situations, if you will, that the customers would bring that particular problem to their partners, and they need some assistance and help and guidance on that, where that application placement will be. Yeah. So that is part of the workshops that we offer to our partner community, so that they're better prepared to have those type of conversations. Because I spoke of a particular problem with the cloud provider slash telco, but that is a very similar question that our partner community is probably going to be facing, as you mentioned, because the customers that we're talking on with our partners as well are multi-cloud, or they want to become multi-cloud. Mm-hmm. So then the question becomes is, okay, do I exit everything out of my data center and move everything to the cloud? Which ones do I leave on-premise environment? Which ones do I move to the public cloud? Do I use one of my partner's data center to augment or complement what I already have? So it definitely changes in terms of, and there's no one single offering, if you will, or one single technique that the partners can use. It provides them as much information that the customer can provide. The more insight that the partners have of those particular customers, the easier it will be. But it's a very complex decision-making process that the partners are the best suited to help the customers at the end of the day, because they know the customer's environment, they know the public clouds, they know what it is to run a multi-cloud environment. So the partners are very well suited for that particular task.
Yeah, and just before we sort of come to the close here, Alfredo, I mean, let's switch gears a little bit to GTM. And one of the kind of the key things that I focus on is try and help partners to sell that message outbound to their customers. Considering that I think it's something like 80% of customers now are more educated than ever before in your services and in the technologies. Before they've even picked up the phone to you, they understand a lot about your services. So how should partners be outbound communicating this. From my perspective, they should be spending a lot more on focused marketing, on announcing and messaging these differentiators into their customer base, into their target customer base, understanding, or profiling their customers so they can really accentuate the specific messages that they feel the customers are going to need and are looking for. What else should they be kind of doing in terms of go-to-market activities?
So the first thing, as I mentioned, is profiling their customer, understanding the customer's business challenges, and what is the value that the partner provides to kind of meet them in the middle. That would be kind of the first step.
Yeah.
Then in terms of marketing or communication, definitely not only do you want to select one or two of the unique value proposition that you provide to your customers, but once you pick, let's say, your main superpower is sovereign cloud, is a mission critical cloud, then you want to exploit those strategic objectives, if you will, into a more robust communication. And most of the partners that we talk to, they say, well, how do I differentiate themselves? Well, obviously it depends what is your customer's needs and what you can provide them. But the other component is, how do you communicate that effectively to your customer base so that they understand that you're not necessarily going to be the partner to solve all the problems, but you're very specifically focused on, vertical segment. It's either sovereign cloud, is it performance cloud, or one of the others, and that you know how to talk to the customers, and definitely be very specific in your marketing on, providing, if it's social media, if it's through banners, through white papers, so that the customer understands that you understand what their needs are, their business outcomes that they're trying to achieve, and how does the partner is going to help them or enable them to help the customer, go through that particular challenge and how to solve that particular challenge. So you're right that, marketing and communication has to be a very expensive channel that the partner needs to be doing. One thing is to have the technology and the infrastructure and the people ready to go, but if you don't communicate accurately and very precisely to your customers, what exactly is it that you do for them, the customers are just probably going to move on.
Yeah.
One other example, final example, is that if you're talking about infrastructure constantly to your customers, but then your customers' needs change from, infrastructure services to, I need somebody that can help me with app modernization. If you're not communicating that you're also providing that level of, sophistication or solutions, if you go to customers, the customers are going to assume, yeah, that partner, they do a lot of infrastructure, they do a really good job, but they're not really into the app modernization space. So it is very important that your communications change as your verticalization, your specialization changes to meet the customer's needs where they are.
Yeah, you mentioned some good points there. I'm just going to zoom into these very quickly. So in regards to, understanding customers' requirements, we're starting to see the emergence more and more, and I think it's going to become more of a trend over the next couple of years, of what they're calling industrial cloud. And COVID has really driven this. Pandemic has forced a lot of businesses to start going online, and online providers, particularly hyperscalers, have started tuning their portfolios much more to specific verticals and industries. And that's something also our cloud providers should think about. Who is their kind of target audience? How are they building solutions to meet that target audience needs, that industry need? And that will enable them to start, converging and compressing the amount of kind of white noise that's in the organization and focusing in on their strengths, advertising their strengths. And that will make much more compelling for, customers who are looking at, media, for example, film companies, and gaming companies. These guys, have high capacity requirements that are very specific to the industry they're in. Providing solutions around that and becoming the application experts in those areas will help you tune your portfolio, help you consolidate your resources, and become far more beneficial to the customers that you're addressing. And the second point, which you mentioned, which is really important, is customer enablement. That should never stop. Don't get a customer on board and then move on to the next one. You've got to have a team dedicated with upsell, focusing on customer nurture, understanding what those programs are within the customer, communicating new services that are coming along, getting the customer's input to build those services and actually piloting those services with customers. Don't necessarily start stuff from the from the top when it's all fully baked and then realize you haven't got bits that you need. Work with customers to evolve those services and those portfolios. But I would say and recommend particularly aligning to industry verticals. I think this is something that the hyperscalers are going to start really commoditizing on, and that's going to put further pressure on our cloud providers to differentiate within those verticals as customers come with them with very verticalized requirements.
Yeah.
Okay. Alfredo, thank you very much for the conversation today. It's been really enlightening and great to talk to you about differentiating your services, and particularly looking at it in terms of cloud as a whole, not just necessarily differentiating your infrastructure service to a hyperscale service, but all of the different value aspects of being a cloud provider and using the VMware stack to kind of achieve those goals. Any final thoughts from you, Alfredo?
Just wanted to say, our partner community, thanks for your support. We're here to help you. If any of the cloud providers are listening to us, if they want to have a particular session with us on any particular strategy or topic, we can help you. We're spread around the world to try to help the different geos and all the different needs. So if any customer, any partner that needs us, we're here to help you. Other than that, it was great. Thanks so much, Guy, for the opportunity, and look forward to having another conversation with you in the near future.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot for your time, Alfredo.